On our journey to awakening, there's a number of myths that we face and we're going to have to overcome. Because at some point in our lives, we all wanted to ascend to the top of our professional mountain. Many times it became an obsession. We drank the kool-aid. We did whatever it took. And then it happened. The big corner office, the power, the prestige, the money, the influence, and the large staff. But it didn't give us the joy we expected. Now what? What's missing? Were we simply chasing a myth? Scott Mason reached the summit as an attorney. He had it all. So why wasn't he happy? But more importantly, what did he do about it? Let's find out. My guest and friend, Scott Mason, he graduated from the Columbia School of Law. He spent 25 years as a top attorney, a C-suite officer, and an entrepreneur. Now, today, he's known as the Myth Slayer, and I love this. He's a transformational coach for miserable attorneys and corporate executives, and he uses Greek mythology. Now, think about that for a second. His tagline is, I want your future to be epic. Scott, welcome to Life Altering Events.
I'm ecstatic to be here. Thank you for having me.
Scott, for the few people who don't know you, why don't you share a little bit about your background?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I am a attorney by trade, practiced for about 25 years, and as you so aptly put, at the beginning was miserable the whole time. I grew up in the backwoods of Kansas, and I felt alone, isolated, depressed. I knew there was more. My mom was a dog food factory worker. My father worked for the highway patrol. I remember I would jog on the wheat fields at night and then look up at the stars in exhaustion and dream about that magical life that I would live. But when I pursued what I thought it would be, it ended up literally taking me to Hades. And I had to resurface to our world. I had to learn to shift my own myths and to learn what I could from Greek mythology and turn my life around to live like an Olympian. And I want nothing more than to help other people do the exact same thing.
Now, Scott, you were every attorney's dream job. You were a powerhouse attorney in Manhattan. And yet you told me you didn't like what you were becoming.
Oh, yeah.
Why didn't you like it? What did you become?
You know, one time I had lunch with a colleague of mine who I had been friends with for quite a while in my career at that point. And I talked to her about my leadership. I was known to be effective, to get things done, to be able to turn a unit around or a division around or even an agency around, to help bring it operationally and from a team performance perspective to a different place. But how was I truly perceived? Frank, it was a heck of a wake-up call when she described me as resembling Darth Vader. I would look up in the morning, splash water on my face to help alert myself, just like a lot of people do. But when I would look in the mirror, it's almost as if the face I would see was a ceramic shell with nothing inside but fire, brimstone, and smoke. I was a human being without a soul. That's no way to live.
Wow. So was that the aha moment once you had that conversation and you said, wow, I got to start another journey here?
It was the beginning of the aha moment. It was more of a process. Not long after that, I began to have conflicts with an agency head that I worked for. I was second in command of New York City's administrative court system. And the head of that agency and I didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things. And essentially, we agreed, and I voluntarily wanted to move on into a different point in my life. So the aha moment sort of made that decision easier for me. But then the struggles I had reinventing myself and my career, not to mention the myths that I had bought into that were ultimately dragging me down and keeping me incapable of becoming what was possible, made that struggle more intense. In a way, slammed my face onto the pavement in a way that the aha moment went from being something that was gradual to, oh my God, my face is bleeding. I need to begin to do something.
I can relate to that. It's like the 2x4 between the eyes. I remember that happening to me. It was like, why are you not seeing the signs? Did you have that conversation with yourself? The signs are there. Why am I not seeing them?
Yeah, isn't that ridiculous how we can be that way? It's funny. There was a friend of mine that I had known since my very first days practicing law. And when I would talk to her about some of my career sojourns and some of my ups and downs, I would say, Scott, there are patterns emerging here. You don't seem happy. Have you ever thought about the possibility this is a signal? And all I could do was dismiss her. I was so obsessed with proving that there's nobody from Kansas who no one believed in anyway could actually make it, that I was willing to ignore everything, even the universe. It was ridiculous, but perhaps I needed that to happen to really learn and understand.
Exactly. It's someone told me one time, one of our friends, in fact, I think it was Claudia Wyatt, who said,
Oh, love her.
the universe taps you on the shoulder, but
Yeah,
you don't respond. Then it's a little shove. And then
yeah.
it's a push. And then it's a 2x4 between the eyes. It's like, wake
Oof.
up. Something's not right here. You need to be making a shift. Exactly. Now let's talk about Greek mythology, as you mentioned it
Absolutely.
earlier. You use this all the time, all these posts and all these things. Where did this come from? How do you use it with your clients?
Where does it come from? I'll go to first. Then we'll get into how do I use it. When I was 9 years old, Frank, I was in a bookstore in Denver, Colorado, and I saw next to the cashier's desk a children's book on Greek myths with the god of the sun, Helios, at the top. And it was as if I was struck by lightning. I bought that book. I spent every little bit of my 9-year-old allowance on that. I still have that book to this day. That God spoke to me. It was like I had found my avatar. Ever since then, I have studied these things and I began to gradually appreciate that the reason these stories resonate and have lasted for so long is that they have transformative power. Ultimately, what are Greek myths? They are the stories that represent the hopes, the aspirations, the dreams, the fears, the cautionary tales, the values of an entire culture. And they have been popularized around the world because they speak to all of those things to the global population. But what is a culture? What is a population? But a group of individuals. All of these things, these myths, are projections of the exact same ideals from the individual to the culture, and they reflect back. I use them with that understanding. The deities, the gods, the goddesses, as well as the heroes, represent the highest possibilities that each of us have. And they have these characteristics because they speak to universal personality types or story tropes. I also use them because both the stories and the roles that are contained within them provide ways that people can examine their own behaviors or how they interact with the world or what narratives they're telling themselves through a lens that has enough of a distance to be able to actually take it in, but has so much power that they simply cannot be ignored. And when that happens, Frank, it's a beautiful thing.
Folks, you need to, if you're not following Scott on LinkedIn, you need to, because he puts a lot of these up there with these Greek mythologies. And it always amazes me, Scott, that you read it and it's like, oh my God, this is me. But you're not attacking the individual. You're using, hey, look, this thing has been around since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
Do you see it? Does it
Yeah.
fit? And what are you going to do about it?
That's exactly what it's about, my friend.
Now, do you see how difficult is it for the as you call them the miserable attorneys to to grasp that, because you guys tend to be very fact oriented, right?
Yeah, I think that across the board with every client I've worked with, those that tend to be attracted to me are those who somewhere inside have an understanding that there is a creative, a visionary, I would say, almost mythic soul within themselves that needs to be expressed. One of the things I'm sure that you in the field, the marketing field that you dwell in, are very aware of is the fact that no one is for everybody, but some people resonate profoundly. The person who is like, I want to only live within a box and I am not willing to or able to or interested in exploring the entirety of who I am or what I am, or exploring what might be outside of a certain linear professional progression, probably isn't going to come to me. They might be surprised with what they find, but dispositionally, I prefer to work with those that understand somewhere inside there is an inner visionary, there is an inner warrior, or there is an inner goddess that's waiting to express in a way that's unexpected. Moving life into the unexpected is a beautiful place, and it's a place where I love to dwell.
Outstanding too, when you can get to that point. It's such a liberating feeling. And so often, type A's, we tend to, we don't see anything. We're so funneled. And having someone like you who says, hey, turn your head over here a little bit. Let's look over here. Is that what you do with these folks?
Absolutely. And it's interesting when you talk about these personality types and you talk about linear progressions or those that are very kind of in the box personalities. One element of the work that I do with my client that addresses that, again, tying back into the theme of Greek myths, is to examine the narratives that they have constructed for themselves within and through a lens of the general genres of myths that I've identified that are toxic. And so I ask people to understand what the 5 genres of toxic myths are and whether any of those are things that you're falling into. For instance, I was falling into, by becoming an attorney, what's called the social myth, which is when your life is living out the social expectations of others. And if you're saying, I am an attorney, I'm going to be linear because that's who or what I am, or what people expect of me, you're probably living out the social myth, or the tragic origin myth, which is, I am the way I am because I was born or raised a certain way, and that ain't changing. That's a myth. It's toxic, and it leads to a Greek tragedy many times.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've heard that going through the corporates to the CEO level that I was at, it's it's just the way it is. We've always done it this way.
Yeah.
I'm not changing. I am what I am. And it's sad. It's sad because you're missing so much. The world has so many things that you can experience that will bring you pleasure and joy. Why are you making yourself miserable? It's crazy.
You know, I have a friend who is a former NASA astrophysicist. Now she's a dream interpreter. Okay? So I'll just give her credit for having kind of the coolest career trajectory of
I
anyone I've ever
guess
met in
so.
my life. But, and I certainly will give her credit for being smart. And one of the things that she pointed out to me that I will never forget is that the scope, size, scale, and age of the universe, not to mention the amount of time that the universe has ahead of it, is incomprehensible. It is beyond what the human mind can begin to grasp. And yet, through the billions of years that the universe has existed and the trillions of years that it will exist, and in that vastness, with all of these star systems and planets and life forms that have existed, will exist, might exist, and then within the history of the earth itself, which has had people on it for hundreds of thousands of years, or tens of thousands of years at the most, or the least, there's only been one life. That's yours. Only one in the entire history of this cosmos. So, what are you doing with it? Are you saying that's the way it is and letting that little spark of time go by? Or are you going to strive to climb to Mount Olympus and make the most of this unique opportunity that each of us have? That's what I ask.
That's amazing. I love that. Now, Scott, you're going to be giving a TEDx talk and you're
Yes.
planning a series of books. Share a little bit
Yes.
about that.
Yes. So thank you for asking about that. I'm actually doing two TEDx talks coming up in April of 2024. We're recording this in January of 2024. The first is tentatively called Charismatic Olympian, and it is about how Greek myths can help you ignite that charisma within so that whatever your message is, whatever path you choose to take, the world cannot help but pay attention. Number two is a retelling of the story of Achilles, and it explains through that story exactly what the 5 types of toxic myths are and what can happen if you're willing to obliterate them and own your life as a heroic journey to become an Olympian. Those are the TEDx's. My books, I describe as sort of a, for those of you who like business books, The Richest Man in Babylon, a series of books, but using Greek myths as the metaphor for professional transformation. As envisioned, we're looking to examine the creation of the world and examine the origin of the heroes, and then look at individual hero and Olympian stories, all as allegories for professional and personal transformation. This is going to be a stunningly illustrated book. There is the concept designs will blow your mind, and they're not like Greek myths as you have ever seen them before. And we're also looking to accompany them with a graphic novel series as well. But that's a little bit more tentative, but that graphic novel series will eventually happen.
Big dreams and powerful messages that are being sent that need to occur. And I love the fact that it's a different spin because there's so many coaches. I mean, I get calls every day from coaches that
Yeah.
I can help you with this. I can help you with that. Well, how are you going to help me do that? What are you going to do? Why is it going to be different? And yours is very different. Let's take a look at this is history. There it is.
Yeah.
This has been around since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
And here's how you can use it to implement to make yourself epic. Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
You say, I want your future to be epic.
Yes.
Define epic. What's epic mean?
I'm going to step back a little bit to answer that question. What an insightful question. And I have to say, I've done close to 100 podcasts and shows and that sort of thing, and no one has ever asked that question before. So, congratulations on that one.
Well,
But that's
thank
no
you.
surprise considering the quality of this show as you demonstrated so far. So, let's talk about what we associate with an epic. Most people, when they think about an epic, think about a hero or a heroine going on some sort of dramatic journey to achieve something and then ending up with a reward at the end. And in popular imagination, that's described as the hero's journey. And it is associated because of the author Joseph Campbell with what's called the monomyth, which is what he believes is sort of the underlying story that all myths tell. Now, before I say what I'm about to say, Joseph Campbell is my homeboy and my hero. However, it's important to understand that his framework is not the only one or even the dominant one within the circles of those who study myth to explain and interpret these stories. And so my interpretation of what a hero is actually different than his. I view a hero as someone who has been able to make a decision in the face of crisis and engage in a process of transformation. When
Mm,
they engage in the transformation, they become something else. They become an Olympian. An Olympian, just as an aside, is someone who is in control of their sphere, who is fully creative, actualized, who people respect, and who earns the tribute, in other words, the financial remuneration that they deserve. But getting back to a hero in Greek myths, if you were an ordinary person and you died, you became a shade that wandered around the underworld, just like a zombie, without your memories or without your identity. However, if you chose to become a hero when you died, that didn't happen to you. You went to paradise. You retained your memories and your identity. You became someone that was even able to travel between the world of the living and the dead. You became like a god. You became like an Olympian. Answering your question, epic is someone who is willing to engage in that transformational process, as is demonstrated by the stories of the heroes, and become that Olympian.
Wow, that is intense. That is so intense. I love that. Outstanding. Joseph Campbell is somebody that I've run into from time to time in some of his work. And the one that sort of jumps out to me, which I think you just hit on, is you must give up the life you plan in order to have the life that's waiting for you. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to be able to return. I think this is a valuable thing that he points to. Once you have achieved your state of enlightenment or your state of ultimate actualization, and do something with it and make a difference in the world. When we talk about the monomyth framework that he set forth, there's always a point in the hero's journey in which they have the choice to stay in whatever realm that is sort of supernatural, or to come back home. And too many times I view the transformational process as one in which people have the enlightenment, they have the ability to think differently about their life situation and their choices going forward, but that's when they choose to run away, or they choose to leave coaching, or they are somehow afraid to step into turning it all into reality. Well, what's the point? You know, it's nice to have illumination. It's nice to have insight. It's nice to have internal transformation. But so what? If you ain't doing anything about it, you're doing all this for nothing except you. It's an ego trip. Joseph
Exactly.
Campbell does point to something very important there.
Yes, exactly. There's fear. And
Yeah.
then you're just at the precipice. I've seen this
Yeah.
so many times. You're right there. And then the fear comes in. I
Yeah.
don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm good enough. I don't know if I
Yeah.
want to put in the effort and the energy. How do you get past that?
During the creation of the world in Greek myths, the Olympian gods had a war with their predecessors to become the lords and the queens of the universe. But Mother Earth, whose children were the losers in this war, was mad. So she sent a monster named Typhon. Typhon was as tall as the sky. He had like snakes for feet, and he had 100 heads, and his wingspan was spread across the entire universe. And the gods, Zeus in particular, were so afraid that they turned into small little animals and ran away to Egypt. The goddess of wisdom had to rally Zeus and remind him that he had weapons like the thunderbolt, and he had the possibility of courage to be able to face it. And Zeus did, and ultimately became the celestial ruler of his empire that we all know today. Why do I share that story in answer to your question? Perhaps it's obvious, but let's make it clear. Fear is something that, as often as not, shrinks us. And when we are shrunk and hiding away, it can be difficult to go alone to find it. The goddess of wisdom, those in our circle who are capable of rallying us, who understand our possibilities, what we can do, and who have the wisdom to point out to us a process for making it can happen, are those that we turn to. Zeus, although he was the lord of the gods, wasn't so egotistical that he wasn't open to some coaching, mentoring, and guidance. That's advice for those who may think that they are too afraid to actually change. There are resources out there. If Zeus could use them, you can too.
Exactly. Exactly. So you leave this 25-year career, very, very successful career. What are you most proud of since you left that 25-year career?
Since leaving the 25-year career, that's interesting. Thank you for asking that. You know, the sort of positions that I had, particularly in, so the majority of the legal career that I had was in government, in mostly policy or operational positions. They were executive and leadership positions, or in the nonprofit sector. And all of these positions were those in which people were really being helped. Yet, too many people that I worked with, speaking of fear, were afraid to ever change. When I first told folks that I was leaving government service in particular, why are you giving it up? You're surrendering. It's a hard world out there. Can you make it? Well, why not just be here and live out and get your pension? Why did I? What I'm most proud of is, Frank, that I overcame the belief that I couldn't do it and somehow managed to. And I was able to find something that was individual and my own, like we talked about earlier. This framework is truly my own. You know, when you work for large organizations like I did, ultimately what you're doing is sublimating your own muses, your own vision for that of someone else. The ability to tap in, find my own muse, and then be here singing it with other muse inspired people such as you is perhaps what I'm most proud of.
I can relate that. There's so many people that listen to this that are living that. Okay, this is what I got. I got 4 years to retire. I got 2 years to this, and they exist.
Yeah,
They're not living.
yeah.
They're
It's so
not.
sad.
It is. It is. So Scott, we're just about out of time here. So what last thoughts? And you've given us many thoughts, but what last thoughts do you want to leave with the people around the world here?
I want them to remember, going back to the theme of epic and our time here in this universe, that it's not only about you or me, what we may want or what may feel good. Each of us were given the opportunity to live a life that's epic and gifts and talents and even a potential purpose for the benefit of others. If we have been given the ability, the desire to do more, and turn away from it because of fear, we're not only depriving ourselves of something, we're depriving the world of that. And I actually view that, this is a radical point of view, but I hold to it. That's an ethical crime because the world needs you. Don't commit that crime. Be what
Absolutely.
you can be.
Wow. So Scott, there's got a whole bunch of people going to want to get a hold of you after they watch it. So how do people get a hold of you?
Go to myfreedomrocks.com. One word, myfreedomrocks.com, and sign
Okay.
up. You will also see all of my social media links. And if they're following you on LinkedIn or another platform, they can probably find me there. But at My Freedom Rocks, you can directly follow me. And I would love to be in touch. You can always just reach out, email me, or DM me on one of the platforms. I love to socialize. I'll socialize with you.
And when you contact Scott, he gets back quickly. So
Oh, good. Glad to hear
reach out.
that.
He's amazing. As I said, we're just about out of time. I want to thank my good friend Scott Mason, who's showing people there's far more to life than a title and a paycheck. There's a whole universe out there waiting for you to take your place. Now you can see this on my podcast, which is called Life Altering Events. It'll be on Parade Deck. It'll be on my YouTube page, which is called Frank Sakari, because it's just simple. I can remember that. I also send links to Scott. He will post them everywhere in his world. If you have my YouTube channel, please subscribe. Now let me leave you with this. None of us are in this alone, and the secret to walking on water is to know where the rocks are. And today, Scott showed us where many of those rocks are. Join us again next week for another life-altering event. Scott, one more time, thank you so much.
My pleasure.